and you beat FNAF to the child actually being a creation of the people behind the scenes. You committed to Joey Drew having a cartoon daughter and a cartoon son, and I at least appreciate you for that. We don't need 80,000 game theory videos. So earlier this year, we made a video talking about how Bendy and the Dark Revival was a doomed game. And I'd like to admit that I'm wrong. I was wrong about that. We already started praising the game, the last trailer that came out. Well, this month the game released, and it's actually really good. So today we're going to talk about how Bendy and the Dark Revival not only worked well as a sequel, but helped redeem the first game and the Bendy franchise.
Yeah, honestly, I'm surprised, and I will also admit I was wrong. I genuinely didn't think it was going to come out, because it had been so long since it was first announced that it was going to be coming out, and there was a lot of drama behind the scenes, it seemed, so I figured it would never come out, but it has, and as Shad said, it is a good game. We'll talk about that more.
The first thing I want to talk about is the story. Now, when it came to the first Bendy game, like we mentioned in our first Bendy video, the biggest problem with Bendy was that the story felt rushed, it felt retconned, it felt like the ending was changed at the last second. In the first Bendy game, it was hinted that Joey Drew was going to be Bendy, but at the very end it was revealed that Bendy was just an ink monster, and Bendy is Bendy. And I thought that that was lame because everyone had an ink counterpart, that being the projectionist was a real projectionist, Alice Angel was Allison, everyone had a counterpart. It'd be weird that Joey Drew wasn't Bendy. But in this game, it makes it clear that Joey Drew made the ink world as a way to punish a fake version of Henry, and that mostly everyone who's in the ink world is not their real world counterparts. They're made by Joey as a way of like vent art. And the plot of the first game is now you play as a fake Henry stuck in this inky world, and Joey Drew has introduced the Allison Angel to help you be able to escape the hell that he's put you in. There's no way to break the cycle of the ink world, but you can at least have a good ending. And at the very end of the game, when Joey Drew has a little girl next to him that calls him Uncle Joey, that's his attempts at making an ink daughter, and he eventually ended up succeeding in making an ink daughter, and she called him Uncle Joey because she was just a failure, and the finalized one saw him as a father. So with that, a lot of the problems with the first game has been fixed. Henry isn't really Henry, which is kind of a disappointment. He's just a clone. The people in the ink world are just counterparts to real people, and we now know that the ink world is a separate dimension that Joey was making as like a giant theme park attraction. It was going to be an alternate dimension that people could vacation to. And we now know all the rules of the ink world, we know everything that's going on with it, and we know who's real and who's not for the most part. The second game makes it clear who left the company and who actually got turned into ink creations. So, with all that baggage out of the way, we can actually talk about the plot of this game.
Yep. And I will say, I was never interested in the first one. I never bothered to sit down and watch anyone play through it, especially because afterwards, after all the hype did die down and people were going back to play through it, they said it was really boring. So I was never interested. But the second game I did watch through, and I will say it is really good, and it does have me kind of hoping that it will continue as a story, because it seemed kind of short, but I liked how it told the story. I liked its narrative, and I thought it was really fucking interesting.
So, on to the narrative. In this game, you play as a woman, and you are brought into the ink world by this really suspicious-looking janitor, and in this world, you are doing the typical shit. I said before that it seemed like they were going to recycle all the old levels, but they didn't. They actually just used the motif and remade the levels from basically scratch. You get really cool ink power-ups to get through this world and subdue enemies. You're basically trying to stop this evil janitor who is twisting the ink world, and the evil janitor guy says that he killed Bendy, but in reality he just subdued Bendy, so now Bendy can turn into like a giant ink monster like from the first game, or he can turn into cutesy classic Bendy. And one of the things I said in the trailer video is I was hoping that the cutesy classic Bendy would be an actual character, and he is. You don't get to spend much time with him, but it's enough time for him to become endearing and likable, and for me to be very happy with him being in the game. Basically, he doesn't like being the monster, but the monster is sentient, self-aware, and can actually taunt and talk to the player, so the monster is like an actual character this time. You go through this really messed up world, you see some of the stuff that this Wilson, the janitor guy, has been making himself, and at the very end of the game, Wilson tries to turn you into a giant ink monster to fight Bendy, and you end up pushing him into the machine that would turn you into the monster. He gets turned into the monster, you beat him, but you're mortally injured, and then you fuse with Bendy to become one, and all the friends you made along the way help you out and help you conquer Bendy and create the good ending again by playing the end reel, and everything starts anew in the loop. You end up escaping the ink world and you take Bendy with you, and now he's permanently the tiny good Bendy. So you save the ink world as much as you could. Wilson's defeated, and everything is good. You find out that you're the daughter of Joey Drew. You now work at the studio that makes Bendy cartoons. You're going to continue your dad's legacy, and now you look over the ink world. So all the issues with the first game have been resolved plot-wise.
And from a lot of the stuff that was being told throughout this story, it seems more like it's heavily focusing on a different company kind of being behind part of why the ink world was created in the first place.
Yeah,
which
the
makes it
Gent
seem like it's being set. Yeah, the Gent Corporation. It makes it seem like it might be setting it up for a third game, but I'm not sure about that.
No, at the end of the game, the Gent Corporation steals the ink machine, so 100% we're going back to the ink world again in a third game, and we are definitely going to shoot that Chekhov's gun of going into that ink city, because that ink city was set up this time, but we only get to explore one alleyway. Like, we are definitely going into the ink city next time, the city of, like, broken dreams. That's going to be the location of the next game, and we're going to be going up against the Gent Corporation.
I certainly hope so, because that is one thing I will say I was disappointed about, because about halfway through the game, we get introduced to this massive ink city, so we are shown that there is more to this place than just the Joey Drew studio. But we only get to visit a handful of locations, and it felt disappointing, because we see how big the place is. You think you'd be able to explore more. So I'm really hoping when and if there is a third game, we do get to explore more of this city, more of this world. Because it would be really lame just for them to introduce it and only have one part to go through.
The city is going to be like a 1930s inky parody of New York, because it's called the City of Broken Dreams, and New York is called the City of Dreams sometimes. New York was the City of Dreams. It's where people migrated to. It's where a lot of the industries used to exist. It was like the heart of America for a short time period. Liberty Island, the Statue of Liberty, the Empire State Building, the World's Trade Center. New York used to be giant, and it still is giant, but I think that's where we're going to be focusing on next time, because Joey Drew Studios is located in, like, basically New York. So we're going to get a fictitious New York next time, and I'm hyped for that. But now since we're done with the story, for everything I wanted to talk about with the story, there's a lot of little stuff like character interactions, notes and stuff, but if you want to explore all that, you can explore all that. I talked about the main beats that I wanted to talk about with the story, and I guess now we can move on to gameplay.
Yeah. Gameplay-wise, seemed fine. Like, I heard before it got really repetitive with the crafting and everything, but it seemed more like you were just exploring. I do think when you hide and the monsters disappear immediately, that's kind of lame, because it completely tears away the tension. Because in a lot of other games, you see them pacing outside the locker and stuff, or maybe not even that, maybe they're somewhere else in the room, but I get that that can be annoying to have to wait it out, especially if they're waiting a really long time in the room. But I think the enemy immediately disappearing also just kind of kills it for a horror game.
So, in this game, you have two sets of powers. You have your ink powers, which let you teleport around and subdue enemies. And then you also have your pipe. Your pipe is your melee weapon, and you can get it to be upgraded to unlock doors, stun enemies, and then take down the even bigger enemies later on in the game. Those are the two things you're focusing on, is powering up your inky form and powering up your melee weapon. And the game is pretty good at rewarding you for exploring by giving you upgrades, and it rewards you for actually searching through stuff or giving you pieces to upgrade. You have a lot of stuff around you that you need to utilize to upgrade your character. Or if you want to, you could probably try to beat the game without upgrading anything. You still need to upgrade the pipe to unlock doors, but for the most part, you might be able to beat the game with no inky upgrades, but that would be like a hard mode on a hard mode. But overall, I think with the gameplay, it's very interesting. I think the exploration with the teleporting was really clever. I think that this is definitely a step up from the last game. I'm kind of disappointed that we didn't get to use the weapons from the last game. They're shown off, but they're never like able to be picked up, not even in like a bonus game mode. Like, it would have been cool to have that. But I think that overall this game is a lot better. I think that it suffers from enemies repeating. I think it suffers from lack of enemy variety. I think that there are even less boss fights in this game than there was last time. It seems like that they focused more on exploration and how big the world was, rather than on the boss fights and enemy encounters. I feel like we needed more. There could have been more introduced to this world. Like, the Butcher Gang doesn't need to be the only enemies that Bendy has encountered. Introduce new enemies, introduce new cartoon rivals, introduce anything other than the bland, inky blob people that attack you. I like that they introduced like a scrapped fourth member of the Butcher Gang, but I feel like there could have been other factions and other cartoon characters that could have been introduced rather than just the Butcher Gang.
I do think that is also an issue, especially because we're in this world of ink, and there's already other creations that has been stated to not have come from the original creator. So why don't we have more either scrap designs or new characters thrown in that people have made and have been trapped or created specifically to be in this world? I think variation for the enemy types would be good.
Hell, the guy we're fighting this time is also a cartoonist, but the only, like, original designs he makes are the people with searchlight heads, and then his fucking sailor guy. He should have made more original tunes that counter Joey Drew's tunes. And one thing I want to bring up that's like a story element, but also could have been a gameplay element, is at one point you get told about this guy named Amok, and like you end up taking over his cult by killing him. And when you do that, it does nothing. Like at the end of the game, when you're fighting Bendy's forces or when you're fighting the forces of Wilson, the Amok people never come to help you or anything. So like, if they would have came and they would have been like your personal bodyguards or something, or you could summon them to attack for you, like Brutal Legend style, that would have been cool. But instead, like, they were kind of pointless. You became their leader, and that was just like a thing that happened. And I really feel like that could have been expanded upon or done anything with. I feel like when it comes to this world, I feel like there needed to be more stuff to do with the gameplay, because it's cool to have a world that you can explore. It's cool to have trinkets and stuff that you can find and stuff you can read, but it almost feels like you're playing a story rather than playing a game. And I think that that's the big problem with this, is that it got too obsessed with its own lore and too obsessed with its own storytelling and forgot that it's a horror video game. There was never a point where I felt like anything was actually out to get us, and I never really felt like there was a point where we were in any actual danger. All the twists were the same twists from the first game, like Alice Angel attacking you, or just generic fucking grabbers and stuff, and Bendy chasing you, and you have to hide from him. The only new thing was is that there was a spider enemy, but it was really easy to kill. And then there was the sailor guy, and that was it. And I feel like, honestly, that's not enough. There needed to be more in the gameplay variety.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, just going back to the Amok stuff, I think that it kind of shows that they probably had more in mind, but either decided to just kind of sideline it for other stuff and not expand upon it, which I think kind of hurts them. Because of that, I think they really focused a little too much on story. And I also wanted to bring up, because we kept calling him just the janitor, but you've also mentioned now that he is a cartoonist. Wilson the janitor, it's hiding as a janitor. He's actually the owner or the son of the owner. And that's part of why you've been brought into this place for him. He's not just some crazy guy, crazy janitor guy. Yeah, so there's kind of two different factions, and I'm not quite sure as to how he knew about the Inkwell, but
he just saw the machine and he said it called to him, and he knew that there was something special about it, and he's been experimenting with it because it called to him.
But because of that, because there's a lack of enemies and stuff, and he's a cartoonist, and he has been interacting with the Inkwell and stuff, I really wish we got to see more of his creations. I really wish more of his enemies, or his creations were enemies in the game. There's a lot more I think they could have done, but it kind of fell short, and that's again where I think the game feels a little too short. It's heavily story-driven, and I don't think there's enough gameplay throughout it. Not enough variety.
So, I think wrapping this up, starting to wrap it all up, it's a good reinvention of the Bendy formula. I say that they need to focus more on enemy variety, introduce more boss fights, give more gameplay elements to this video game. The storyline is basically fixed. All the issues I had with the game's plot from the first game, they've been resolved. You've got a good cliffhanger, you've got a good setup. Joey Drew is basically redeemed in my book. I have no issues with Bendy's plot or world. All the good faith is back in this franchise. You gotta stick me on the third game. The third game needs to be a balance of the stuff from the first game and the second game. More boss fights, more original characters, more stuff that relates to him. Because before we had the projectionist enemy, because he was a projectionist, we had the theme park guy become a theme park attraction. We had a lot of stuff like that. The only thing we had like that in the second game was the guy who got turned into his own creation, which is Wilson. More stuff like that. More twisted cartoons. More twisted stuff involving their professions. Because this takes a lot of influence from the Epic Mickey games. And the Epic Mickey games has a ton of enemy variety, tons of references. You need more. There's a lot you can do with cities. There's a lot you can do with cartoon characters. There's a lot you can do with variety for the next game. No more crappy searchers. No more repeated butcher gang. Do new stuff. Take risk. Introduce cartoons from the new Bendy universe. Introduce new cartoons from other stuff that this company may have absorbed. Introduce stuff original to Gent. Do more for this next game, because it needs to be more. I think that you've got a good start, and you beat FNAF to the child actually being a creation of the people behind the scenes. You committed to Joey Drew having a cartoon daughter and a cartoon son, and I at least appreciate you for that. We don't need 80,000 game theory videos, so I appreciate that you at least commit to your story, and I really hope that you can stick the landing on the next game.